Don't forget to like and subscribe to Jolie Knots Crochet. Share with your friends. Hit that little notification bell so you can get notified when new patterns release. All our videos are available in left and right-handed tutorials.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Jolie Knots Crochet. I'm Crystal and today we are going to be making this With Love Granny scarf. Now this scarf is made back and forth, and in each about approximately 6-inch section we are going to be creating a heart out of the granny stitches. This scarf can be made as long or as short as you like. I have chosen to whip stitch mine together to create an infinity scarf. I have approximately 8 hearts in this, and it is approximately 4.5 feet long. The yarn that I used for this project today is Yarn Bee Chloe in the color French Rose. Now this is 3.5 ounces, 270 yards, and I used an entire one skein of this for this scarf. This is a medium 4 worsted weight. It's actually very thin on the 4 side, and it is a 70% wool, 30% viscose. Now you can use any yarn with the recommended hook size that you like. This is just what I chose. I'm going to be using a 6mm hook for this project. Go ahead and grab your yarn and your materials and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so getting started, I'm going to chain 31.
Now into the third chain from our hook, we're going to put our first double crochet.
And row 1 is going to be double crochets all the way across and to the end. Okay, so here we are at the end. When you get to the end of your first row, you should have 29 double crochets. We're going to have 29 stitches throughout the entire pattern, so your stitch counts should always be 29. Now we're going to chain 2 and turn our work, and we're going to double crochet again into every single stitch all the way down, and you'll again have 29 stitches, and I will meet you back here at the beginning of row 3. Okay, here we are at the beginning of row 3. We're going to chain 2. Our chain 2s do not count as a stitch. Throughout the pattern, they don't count as a stitch, okay? And we are going to double crochet 14. So 1, 2,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
13, and 14. Once you have your 14 double crochets, you're going to chain 1, skip 1 stitch, and then finish out another 14 double crochets. Go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back at the beginning of row 4. Okay, so here we are at the beginning of row 4. I have done my chain 2, and now I'm going to double crochet in the first stitch and in the next 11 stitches. So you'll have 12 double crochets total. Once you have your 12 double crochets, you should have 2 stitches left before your chain space. Now this chain space is going to be the bottom part or the bottom point of our heart. Okay, so now you're going to chain one, you're going to skip these 2 stitches, and we're going to put 3 double crochets into that chain space. We're going to call that a granny stitch. Now you're going to chain one, skipping 2 stitches, and then putting 12 double crochets, 1 in each of the next 12 stitches. So you started with 12 double crochets, and we are going to have that chain one, granny stitch, chain one in the middle, and you will end with 12 double crochets. Okay, so this is what the end of your 4th row should look like. So getting started on row 5, we're going to chain 2 and turn our work, and in this row we're going to have 10 double crochets. So our sides are basically mirroring ourselves. If we have 10 in the beginning, that means we'll have 10 at the end. And now when you have 2 stitches left and 10 double crochets, you are going to chain 1, skip these 2 stitches, and we're going to put a granny stitch in our chain space. Now we're going to chain 1 and skip this granny stitch, and then we'll put a granny stitch into the next chain space. Now we'll chain 1, skipping 2 stitches, and then finishing out our row with 10 double crochets. And I will meet you back at the beginning of row 6. Okay, getting started on row 6, we are going to chain 2, and in this row we will have 8 double crochets across. Now you should have 2 stitches left before your chain space, and we will chain 1 and skip those 2 stitches, and then we're going to put a granny stitch. Chain 1, skip your granny stitch, and then we're going to put another granny stitch into the next chain space. Again, chain 1, skip 1 granny stitch, and then granny stitch into the chain space. So you'll notice that our granny stitches are growing by 1. We started with 1, then we'll have 2, 3, and then I'm going to leave you, you'll skip your 2, double crochet your 8 in the end, and you'll decrease all the way down until you get to 4 stitches on each side and 5 granny stitches in the middle. So finish out this row, do the next 2 rows, and then I will meet you back for row 9. Grow your stitches, grow your rows all the way to 5 granny stitches across. Okay, here I am at the end of row 8. I have 4 double crochets on the outsides, separated by chains, and 5 granny stitches. Okay, so that's growing our heart, and now we're going to start shaping the heart to curve over the top. All right, so what we're going to do in this row, this is row 9, we are going to chain 2, and we're going to double crochet 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now that should bring you right up to the double crochet before your granny stitch. Now you'll chain 1 and double crochet into that chain space, just like this. Chain 1, and we're going to put a granny stitch into the next. We're going to repeat that we're going to do that a total of 4 times. So this row, chain 1, skip 1 granny, we're going to have 4 granny stitches across. Chain 1, skip your granny, and then put a granny stitch. Chain 1, skip, granny. When you get to your last space, we should have 4 grannies across. And when you get to your last space, after your chain 1, you'll place 1 double crochet and 1 chain, and then you'll finish out with 4 double crochets. And that's the end of your row 9. Chain 2, and for row 10, again we're going to do 4 double crochets across. And we're going to skip both of these chain space, the chain space and the double crochet, and then into our second chain space we're going to put a granny stitch. So chain 1, granny stitch. Now this row we're going to have 5 granny stitches again. Chain 1, granny. Chain 1, granny. Now we've gotten to the end, so we're skipping our double crochet in our chain space, and we're finishing out with 4 double crochets. That's the end of your 10th row. So this is what your scarf should be looking like, and creating our heart. Now we have 1 more row to go to complete our heart. So you're going to chain 2, turn your work, and 4 double crochets. Now into our first chain space, we're going to put 2 double crochets. Chain 1, skip your granny stitch and put a granny stitch into the next chain space. Chain 1, skip your granny stitch, and into the next chain space we're putting 2 double crochets. Now, working on top of each double crochet from the next granny, we're going to put 1 double crochet on top of each double crochet, and then we're going to finish that out with 2 double crochets into the next chain space. So it should look like this. 2 double crochets in your chain space, 1 double crochet on top of each double crochet, and then 2 again. Now chain 1, skip your granny and put a granny into the next chain space. chain 1, skip your granny, and we're going to end with 2 double crochets in your last chain space, and then 4 double crochets into the end. That's the end of your row 11. So our heart is complete now. We're going to go ahead and do 1 double crochet row. So we'll chain 2, turn your work, do 1 full double crochet row, 1 double crochet on top of every single stitch and in every single chain space. So we're going right back to we're going right back to 29 double crochets across. So now when you finish with row 12, you'll see your heart a lot more. All right, and there you go. That's your heart. So what you're going to do is repeat rows 2, 3, all the way up to row 12. So you'll have a double crochet row, and then your next row will be the double crochet with that chain 1 in the middle. And you're going to create your heart as long as you like. You don't have to put it together as an infinity scarf. You can just leave it as is and put little fringes on the end if you like, or pom-poms, or whatever you're comfortable with. The size of this is going to be my size. I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just over 6 inches for an entire repeat, not including my first row, just from there. So go ahead and finish that out.
Thanks for watching Jolie Knots Crochet. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Join us on the Jolie Knots Crochet community on Facebook and show us what you've created.